folds of his belt, Hori keeps small lengths of cloth, each one slightly damp, wrapped around pebbles. They are for the wrists and the back of the neck, places where blood flows close to the skin. The body cools from its rivers, he says, meaning your veins. On long journeys, he will soak these cloths in early morning while the water is still cool, wrapping them just tightly enough to hold the damp against the pulse points. It's a trick older than the kingdom's oldest stones, learned from the people who lived in the sands before the first pyramid was ever imagined. The camp itself is already dismantling, but not in haste. Bedrolls are folded loosely so the night school can be trapped inside, to be unrolled later in the heat of midday. Each person has their own rhythm. Some move to the edges of the camp to relieve themselves. Others crouch near the fire pit, now no more than a faint circle of ash, to heat a small pot of barley porridge before the sun rises. Hori does not eat yet. Instead, he walks to the ridge just beyond the camp's edge and squats, facing the horizon. You follow, expecting some kind of prayer or ritual, but he simply closes his eyes and tilts his head, as if listening for something. What do you hear? You whisper. He gestures for you to wait. There's nothing but silence at first, or so you think, but slowly you begin to pick out the tiny sounds. The shifting hiss of sand carried on breeze, the faint crackle as the desert's chill begins to shift. Even the occasional distant trill of some birds that has made its home near the bird well. You listen to know the wind, Hori explains. If it's already warm now, we must walk faster. If it is cool, we take our time. This is one of the desert's unwritten laws. Speed is not decided by distance, but by the mood of the air itself. By the time the sun's first edge appears, everyone is dressed in their own variation of the same uniform. Pale robes, headcloths, loose belts, and a few small personal items tucked into the folds. A date wrapped in wax cloths, a sliver of dried fish, a small pot of gall to shield the eyes. Even the animals are prepared. Donkeys are draped with woven mats that fall loosely to cover their flanks, shading them from the early glare. Shading them from the early glare. Water skins are strapped where the wind can touch them, encouraging evaporation to keep their contents cooler than the air. Shade making begins before the heat demands it. Two men carry low poles with loops of linen tied at the ends. As they walk, they look for the first suitable place to raise them, perhaps between two rocks, or beside a low dune where the wind will pass under. When the sun climbs higher, this spot will become the group's midday refuge. The cloth they choose is not thick. It would trap heat, but loosely woven, so the wind can pass through and carry away the warmth. The trick, Hori explains, is not to block the sun completely, but to filter it, to take away its sharpness while still allowing light. As you set out, the air is still forgiving, though the sand is already beginning to lose its night glow. The group moves in the loose formation, not a single line, but a staggered shape, each person finding their own best footing. Hori sets the pace with a kind of practiced slowness, steps long enough to cover ground, but never rushed. The body kept in that narrow space between effort and ease. He points out the low, rolling ridges where the sand has been shaped into softer, cooler slopes by the wind, and the flat stones that hold the chill of night longer than the sand around them. We walk with the night still in us, he says, and we keep it as long as we can. The light changes gradually, but you feel it, a deepening in color, a new sharpness in the horizon, the air growing drier. Somewhere in this shift is the unspoken signal for the first drink of water. Hori shows you how to take it, not in a gulp, but in a slow sip that you hold in your mouth, letting it cool your tongue and throat before swallowing. If you drink quickly, the water leaves you quickly, he warns. You notice that no one drinks until someone else does. It's a collective rhythm, a way of keeping pace not just in movements, but in endurance. Every part of this early routine, from the way the rope is belted to the way to the from the way the rope is belted to the way the first sip is taken, is designed to work with the desert, not against it. And as the light spreads across the sand in that vast, silent bloom, you realize that these hacks are not tricks in the modern sense. They are conversations, answers to questions the Sahara has been asking for thousands of years. Can you slow down enough to survive? Can you listen long enough to learn? The sun's first full edge has cleared the horizon now. Its light, no longer tentative but sure of itself, sliding across the dunes in a slow flight, painting the long slopes in gold and copper, while the hollows between them stay blue with shadows. Hori glances at the color of the shadow and gives a small nod. Not to you, but to himself. We are early enough, he says, and though it's only 4 words, they carry the weight of reassurance, as though you've just been told that the wind will be at your back for the day's journey. There is no scrambling in this morning ritual, no one darting ahead to prove their stamina. The desert is not impressed by speed. It rewards a traveler who treats it like an equal, not an obstacle. The pace is set to match the length of the shadow at your feet, and Hori teaches you to read it. When your shadow grows short, so does your time to walk, he explains. You glance down and realize it's not a figure of speech. The shrinking shadow marks the sun's climb, and the sun's climb marks the moment when walking becomes an act of surrendering coolness for heat. The aim is to stay ahead of that surrender as long as possible. By the time the shadow has shortened, by the time the shadow has shortened by a hand's width, the group has found its first place to pause. It's a small rise, where wind has scoured the sand away from a patch of flat rock. Someone produces a reed mat from a bundle, spreading it in the strip of shade that lies along the rock's eastern side. The shade here is thin but concentrated, like ink spilled on the pale surface. You sit, and the cool of the rock seeps through the mat, a slow, steady relief. No one speaks for the first few minutes, not because of any rule, but because speech is an effort, and the morning is still a thing to be tasted in silence. Hori remembered a small pouch from his belt and shakes out what looks like dried petals into his palm. He drops them into a shallow cup of water from his skin, and within moments, the petals softened, darkening the water. Hibiscus, he says. It keeps the throat wet. He passes the cup to you, and the drink is tart, almost startling against the quiet blandness of the air. But as you swallow, you feel your mouth and throat slick with moisture that lingers longer than plain water. It's a trick you could imagine someone discovering by accident centuries ago. A handful of petals tossed into a jar and forgotten until thirst made someone bold enough to drink a strange red liquid. When you sit in that patch of shade, Hori talks of other early morning practices, passed down through generations like treasured recipes. Some travelers carry small pouches of salt to pinch into the water. The desert, he said, does not just take water from you, it takes what the water carries, and the body must be convinced to hold onto it. Others keep a silver of smooth stone in the mouth to stimulate saliva, tricking the body into thinking it has more moisture than it does. The stone must be clean, and it must be from a riverbed, a reminder of water, even when water is far away. The group does not linger here long. Shade this early is a luxury to be savored, but movement is still the day's currency, and the air will never be kinder than it is now. The poles and cloth from earlier are unrolled and tested in the breeze. The linen lifted and then let down until it billows evenly, then tied so it forms a low canopy over the path ahead. This moving shade is carried with the group, a mobile sanctuary that softens the sunlight without cutting it away entirely. Beneath it, the air feels different, not cool, exactly, but gentle. The glare taken out of it so your eyes and skin are spared the sharpest edge. As you walk again, Hori points to faint tracks in the sand, so light they could be mistaken for the lines of wind. Jerboa, he says, the desert air. They come out in the cool, and their paths tell you where the ground is firmer. You realize that even here, where the land seems barren, life leaves clues about where to step, where to rest. Some travelers learn to follow these signs as naturally as they follow the sun's arc, using them to guide their paths to patches of shade or grounds that will not sink beneath their weight. By the time the sun has lifted enough to set the sand glinting like powdered glass, the group is ready for its second pause. This one is longer, a planned rest before the heat turns up from warning to punishment. The canopy is raised higher now, allowing more air to move beneath it, and jars are unwrapped from damp cloths so that each drink is a fraction cooler than the air. Someone produces a small dish of dates, their skins glossy, and each person takes only one or two. Sweetness here is rationed, not just for scarcity, but because it must be balanced with salt, with water, with the body's need to stay in its narrow band between heat and chill. You eat yours slowly, the sugar thick on your tongue, and you think about how every choice here, from the rogue on your back to the pebble in your pocket, is part of a single conversation with the desert. You are always answering its same question: can you last until night? The noon halt is never chosen on the spot. It is something decided hours earlier, sometimes even the night before, when the experienced eyes in the group read the map, not from parchment, but from the memory of dunes, from the way the stars had risen from the previous night, from the lines of green on the horizon. Hori had pointed toward a low ridge just after sunrise, saying, "There, by the flat stone." You'd seen nothing special there at the time, just another undulation of sand in a landscape of identical folds. But now, as the group approaches, you see the difference. The ridge casts a shadow long before the sun reaches its highest point, and at its base, the sand is darker, a sign that it still remembers a trickle of moisture from a recent night fog. The first order of business is to claim the shadow. It's a quiet ritual. Two or three people spreading nets along the coolest part of the ground. Others raising the canopy so it catches any passing breeze.